Hey, what's up, Chevra? How you doing? Good. Friends, today we're studying Daf Yud Zayin of Masechta Ayruvin, Daf 17. Oh gosh, wait, what? Alright, wait, no, one second. I'm not confused. Let's go. Daf Yud Zayin, right. Last daf in the first parak of Masechta Ayruvin, which is pretty awesome. You did it. Great job, everyone. Today, it's not, I don't know, at the beginning there's a little bit of a machlokas about what happens if the number of people in your group, changes, in the middle, because we said that, one person, is allowed to have it can make this temporary kind of fence up to a base asayim. Now with multiple people that changes, whatever. There was all machlokas yesterday. So the question is, what if your numbers kind of change in the middle? That's kind of the main machlokas on Amud Aleph. And then we get to a new Mishnah, the final Mishnah in the first parak, and whatever. It's not so crazy. Friends, let's start. Tes Zayin Amud Beis, about 5-6 lines from the bottom. Darish Rav Nachman, Mishum Rabbeinu Shmuel. So Rav Nachman expounded in the name of Rabbeinu Shmuel, which is interesting because often Rabbeinu is Rav. Although I think that we saw it one time in Masechta Shabbos that Rabbeinu is also Shmuel. So it's interesting here that we say Rabbeinu Shmuel. Okay? Yachid Nostin Lo Beis Sa'asayim. So if you have one person, so if he wants to make this temporary fence using lovewood things, so then he can enclose an area up to 5,000 square amos, which seems like quite a lot. Right? How many feet are in a mile? 5,000 something. So what's 5,000 square amos? That's 7,500 feet. That's a lot, right? Okay. So beis nosn and beis sa'asayim. Now the same thing applies to two people. They have up to a beis sa'asayim. Gimel naisu shayara. Now if there are three people, then they become what's considered a caravan. V'nosn and beis sheish. Well, then they have up to 6 sa'as. Okay. Now the Gemara asks, Shavkas Rabbanav Avadta Rab Yossi Rab Yidol. So the Gemara asks, one second, Rav Nachman, right? Remember, we had a machlokes yesterday. According to the Chachamim, they said that even a yachid is allowed to take up however much space that he needs. He can enclose with this temporary, this lovewood kind of fence, even if that's more than a beis sa'asayim, and take as much space as you need, as long as you don't have two sa'as, kilo a beis sa'asayim, that is just empty space. Then the wall would be invalid, and you wouldn't be allowed to carry it at all. But as long as you need the space, take as much space as you need. And that applies to individuals, it applies to caravans and everything. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda said that one person and two people have up to a beis sa'asayim. 3 people is a caravan, they have up to 6 sa'ah, which is exactly what Rav Nachman is saying. So the Gemara asks, how come you would paskin like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, rather than the Chachamim? Obviously, we always say, Yachid v'rab malacha kirab. Hadar ukim Rav Nachman amora ale v'darish. So Rav Nachman then set a teacher next to him, somebody to say over what he was going to teach. V'darash, and he expounded dvarim shamarti lefnechem tosin biyadai. The things that I had said initially were a mistake. To say that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Bram, however, kach amru. This is what they said. Yachid nosn lo beis sa'asayim, shnaim nosn lo'en beis sa'asayim. So if it's one person or 2 people, so they can make this lovewood fence up to an area that is a beis sa'asayim. Shlosha, if there are 3 people, naisu shayara, so then they become what's considered a caravan, nosn lo'en kol tzarkan, and they can have as much space as they need. So this is kind of a combination opinion. The reshus seems to be like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, who's saying that 1 and 2 people have up to a beis sa'asayim. And then the seifa seems to be like the Chachamim, who are saying that you can have as much space as you need, right? Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda would have said that 3 people you have up to 6 sa'ah, whereas the Chacham say you have as much as you need, and that seems to be what Rav Nachman is saying. So Reish Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda v'Sefer Rabbanon. So one second, so the Reish is Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda and the Sefer is the Rabbanon. How come the combination opinion? Yes, that's 100% correct. Mishum Dekoy Avur B'Shitzei, because Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda's father, Rabbi Yehuda, holds like him as well. What was Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was that a yachid has up to a base sa'asayim, which is what Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda would say as well. The Chacham would say a yachid can even has whatever he needs. And so we see that since Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda both agree that by a yachid you have up to a base sa'asayim, so therefore it's no longer a yachid, it's no longer a lone opinion, rather it is more than one person. It's Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda as well as Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore we can paskin like them. However, when it comes to a shayara, Rabbi Yehuda would agree with the Chachamim that you can have as much space as you need, and therefore we paskin like the Chachamim over there. Amr Rav Gidol Amar Rav Shlosha B'chamesh Asurin B'Sheva Mutarin. So Rav Gidol says in the name of Rab that it's plausible to have a situation where you have 3 Yidden and they're somewhere for Shabbos and they build this loved wall around themselves and it can fit 5 sa'ah. Okay? And nonetheless, it would be an invalid partition and they would be unable to carry in this area. Yet, B'Sheva Mutarin, you can have another case where you have 3 people and they build this lovewood partition, and it can hold 7 sa'ah, and nonetheless, they're allowed to carry in this area. How could that be? That sometimes they'll make an area of 5 sa'ah, and it's no good, yet they'll make it 2 sa'ah bigger, and it is good. What's pshat, friends? Amrulei, Amr Rav Hachi. So they said to Rav Gidol, did Rav really say such a thing? And what did Rav Gidol respond? Amrulei, he said to them, Oraisa nevi'e uchsive de Amr Rav Hachi. By the Torah, the prophets, and the Ksuvim, certainly Rab said this. It's like he was swearing that Rab said this, right? He was saying, right, on all of the books of Tanakh, Rab certainly said this. Rav Ashi my kasha. Rav Ashi said, what's the big deal? What's so hard to understand? Dilma hachika Amr. Maybe this is what Rab was saying. If these 3 fellows needed 6 sa'ahs worth of space, and they put a fence, a lovewood fence around this area, and they made it large enough to hold 7 sa'ah, i.e. 1 more sa'ah than they need. So afilu b'sheva mutarin, that would be acceptable because the Chachamim said that you can take up as much space as you need as long as there aren't 2 sa'ah that are unused, that are unneeded. Now over here there's 1 sa'ah that is unneeded, but that's okay. It's within the limit. However, lo utzuchu ella, you got to switch this word to l'shalosh and skip the next 2 words. Afilu b'chamesh asurin. But if all they needed was 3 sa'ah, if these 3 fellows only needed 3 sa'ah, and yet they enclosed an area with a lovewood fence of 5 sa'ah, well then they have 2 extra unused sa'ah, which is going to be a problem. So here you can have 3 people that enclose an area of 7 sa'ah, and that's fine. Yet you can have 3 people that enclose an area of 5 sa'ah, and it's not fine. But one second, when the Chachamim say that you can take up as much space as you need as long as you do not have 2 sa'ah that are empty. So mistam, what that means is you can't have 2 sa'ah empty from people, i.e. each person can take up 2 sa'ah, and therefore make sure that you don't have 2 sa'ah unaccounted for by people. And therefore, if that's the case, then if we're assuming that each person can get up to 2 sa'ah, well then if you have 3 people, each person can get up 2 sa'ah, which means that you can enclose an area of 6 sa'ah. But also they say as long as you don't have 2 sa'ah that are empty, so you can really go up until 8 sa'ah. So then how come you would have a situation where 5 sa'ah would be a problem if after all each person is entitled up to 2 sa'ah? So by default they can have at least 6 sa'ah plus another 2 that are empty. So my answer is Lo pani mikalim. No, what empty mean, it doesn't mean empty from humans that like each person is entitled to a certain amount of sa'ah. No, it means empty from items. That if these people have lots of stuff, so then they could take up as much space as they need, as long as there aren't two sa'ah of empty space. But it has nothing to do with the people. You can have a lot of people with a little bit of stuff, so then they're only entitled to less space. You can have a little bit of people with a lot of stuff, and then they're entitled to more space. So that's how you can have sometimes three people that it could be a problem even if they enclose an area of 5 sa'ah. You can have three people that they can even enclose up to 7 sa'ah. Okay. Itmar, it was stated, Shlosha v'meis echod me'en. Friends, so what happens if you had 3 fellows? Okay, now these 3 fellows were camping for Shabbos, and they figured, hey, we're a caravan over here, so let us just enclose, and we can enclose an area that is larger than 2 sa'ah, right? Assuming like Rav Nachman said at the top of the page. Sirens. So assuming like Rav Nachman said at the top of the page, that 1 or 2 people have up to a base sa'asayim, and 3 or more people can have as much space as they need. So you have these 3 fellows who were somewhere for Shabbos, and they put up this lavud fence, and they figured, well, we're 3 fellows, we can make it larger than a base sa'asayim, right? So that's what they do, and then one of them is nifter. One of them passes away on Shabbos. So now there are only 2 people left. So what happens? Do we say, now, right? So now there are basically 2 people that have this area larger than a base sa'asayim that's enclosed by a lavud fence, which me'ikar din is not allowed. But when Shabbos started, it was allowed. But then somebody passed away, and now it's no longer allowed. So can you have, can the status fluctuate over the course of Shabbos, or is there like a snapshot that gets taken before Shabbos and then nothing changes throughout Shabbos? That's essentially going to be the question. So Itmar, Shlosha v'meis echod me'en, if you have 3 fellows and one of them is nifter. Shnayim, if you have 2 fellows, v'nitosvu alein, and then another guy shows up on Shabbos. So, so in that case, there were only 2 people, and again, they built an area that was larger than what they were allowed to build, larger than a base sa'asayim, so they weren't allowed to carry in that area. But then somebody joined them on Shabbos, and now they're 3 people. So can that allow them to now carry? So Rav Huna v'Rab Yitzchak. So it's machlokes Rav Huna and Rab Yitzchak. Chad Amar Shabbos goremes v'chad Amar diurin gormen. So one man the Amar is that it's a snapshot when Shabbos starts, that Shabbos is what causes it. And if when Shabbos started there were 3 people, so then they can carry throughout Shabbos even if one of them passes away. And if when Shabbos started there were 2 people, then they may not carry on Shabbos even if one person joins them. And the other one says that it's all based on the people, i.e. that it can fluctuate. So if when Shabbos started there were 3 people and then one person passes away and now there are 2 people, well, then you can no longer carry. If when Shabbos started there were 2 people and then one other person joined them and now there are 3 people, well then Mazel Tov, now you can carry, have fun. This time the Rav Huna u'da Amar diurin gormen. No, I skipped. I read the same line twice. This time the Rav Huna u'da Amar Shabbos goremes. So let's say that Rav Huna is the one who says that it's the snapshot, that Shabbos causes it. That when, it's all based upon what the status was when Shabbos began. The Amar Rabbah, because Rabbah said, Ba'omer Rav Huna u'va'omer Rav Yehuda. Rabbah says that I asked from Rav Huna and I asked from Rav Yehuda, Erev derech ha-Pesach v'nistam ha-Pesach. What if you had 2 reshus hayachids, Reuven and Shimon? They have a reshus hayachid, right, or a chotzer, right? Reuven's got his house is in his courtyard. Shimon's got his house is in his courtyard, and they share a wall in the middle, and there's a window in that wall, and that window is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, or this is what? This is a Pesach. So there's some kind of door in that shared wall. So now, of course, we know that you can't carry on Shabbos from Reuven's reshus hayachid to Shimon's reshus hayachid. However, if they make an Eruv, then they can. So let's say they made an Eruv, assuming that there was this Pesach in the middle wall, derech hachalon, or by way of the window, right? That there was a window that was 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. Apparently, that is the minimum size to be considered a window that they can make an Eruv with. So they make an Eruv, and now they can carry between the two reshus hayachids. However, v'nistam achalon. But then, so in the first case, v'nistam pesach, in the second case, v'nistam achalon. Right? So then the doorway or the window somehow gets closed up, something crumbles, whatever it is, and now you don't have that window or that doorway anymore. What becomes of the Eruv that they made, assuming that there was this entranceway, this opening into the, between the two chutzers? Now that opening is gone, can you still rely upon the Eruv that they made to enable to carry between the two chutzers? Let's say there were smaller openings or whatever it is, or maybe over the wall, to be able to get things to and between the chutzers. Can you rely on that initial Eruv that you made? So v'amruli, and Rabbah said that Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda said to me, Shabbos ho v'hutra hutra, that once it was already mutter for Shabbos, i.e. since they made the Eruv before Shabbos, and when Shabbos started, they were allowed to carry between the two reshus hayachids. So that remains intact, even though the window or the door is no longer available. Tis time. So there you go. Okay, so we can safely assume that it is in fact Rav Huna's opinion that we take a snapshot before Shabbos, and therefore in our case, when Shabbos started, if there were 3 people, they can carry in this area even if somebody passes away. And if when Shabbos started there were 2 people, they cannot carry in this area even if somebody joins them. So now the Gemara says, Lema Rav Huna v'Rav Yitzchak b'plukta de Rav Yossi v'Rav Yehuda k'miflagei. So let's say that this machlokas between Rav Huna and Rav Yitzchak, right, that Rav Huna says that you take a snapshot when Shabbos starts, and Rav Yitzchak says that things can fluctuate over the course of Shabbos. So let's say that this aligns with a machlokas tanaim between Rav Yehuda and Rav Yossi. What's that? Ditnan, as we learn in the Mishnah, chotzer. If you have a chotzer, a courtyard, shenifritza mishtei ruchosel, that the wall of the chutzner got breached from 2 sides, and this means the corner. Okay, it got breached from the corner. Because the point is that in a corner, it's not considered a Pesach. You don't build a Pesach in a corner, and therefore it's memela considered a breach. Right? So you had a chutzner, it's a reshus hayachid, and now it got breached. So can you continue to carry in that chutzner? Or what if you have a house that got breached in a corner? On 2 sides, kilu in a corner. Or what if you have a mavui that its kora or its lechi disappeared? Mutar in the osa Shabbos. Vasur in the asulav of Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda says, look, you can continue to carry in this house or this chutzner or this mavui for the duration of Shabbos, but if you haven't fixed it by next Shabbos, then you won't be able to carry in these areas. So what do we see? So we see kind of the snapshot mahalach. Rabbi Yossi Omer, whereas Rabbi Yossi says, "Mutar lo osa Shabbos, mutar lo osa lavo, v'masur lo osa lavo, asur lo osa Shabbos." Whereas Rabbi Yossi says, no, things can fluctuate in the middle of Shabbos, right? If it would be something that would be allowed on Shabbos, well then it's allowed on this Shabbos. But since this is something that is not allowed in general on Shabbos, it's not allowed for this Shabbos. Meaning, since in general, if you have this breach in the chutzner or in the house, or you have a mavui without a korah, you're not allowed to carry in these places. So therefore, even this Shabbos, once the status changes, it can fluctuate even within Shabbos itself. So therefore, Lema, Rav Huna d'Amar Rav Yehuda, Rav Yitzchak d'Amar Rav Yossi. So let's say Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda can agree on sort of the snapshot mahalach, right? That however it was when Shabbos starts, that's how it remains throughout Shabbos, no matter what changes. Whereas Rabbi Yitzchak and Rabbi Yossi can connect on the fluctuating mahalach, which is that the status can change throughout Shabbos, and that will have implications for you are or are not allowed to do throughout Shabbos. Amar lach Rav Huna will respond to you and say, Ana da Amri afilu de Rabbi Yossi. Rav Huna, who says the snapshot mahalach, he's going to argue that no, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi both agree with him that when you have, let's say, 3 people who are together for Shabbos and make an area with a lavud fence that's larger than Beis Hasaim, then one of them passes away, they can continue to carry. He's going to say that even Rabbi Yossi, who says that when you have a house, let's say, that got breached in the corner, and you can no longer continue to carry there even on the same Shabbos, i.e. it fluctuates, he will nonetheless agree that when you have the 3 people there for Shabbos, and one of them dies, they can continue to carry. Because Adkan lo ka'amar Rabbi Yossi asam ela delesnu lemechitzes. Rabbi Yossi says that when you have a house, that part of the wall breaks, that you can no longer carry in the house, even though when Shabbos started you could carry. That's because like a wall breaking is a big friggin' deal, right? Like when Shabbos started, you had a wall. Now you don't have a wall. Okay, so like you can't carry there, even though when Shabbos started you were allowed to carry. However, in this case, nothing happened to the lovewood walls. That is all intact. One person, died, but that has no bearing on the validity of like the structure that was built. And therefore, even Rabbi Yossi would agree that in the case of 3 people who made Shabbos together and one of them passed away, they would nonetheless be able to continue to carry. So Rav Huna is arguing that both Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda would agree with him. Another siren. So Adkan lo ka'amar Rabbi Yossi asam el delesnu lemechitzes. Hacha isnu lemechitzes. But over here, there are, all the mechitzes remain intact, so that's fine. For Rabbi Yitzchak Amar, and Rabbi Yitzchak said, Ana da Amri afilu Rabbi Yehuda, and now Rabbi Yitzchak, who says that things can fluctuate throughout the course of Shabbos. So if when Shabbos started there were 3 people, then one of them passed away, then they can no longer carry. So he's going to try and argue, he's going to argue that even Rabbi Yehuda, who says that when it comes to the chotzer, that a breach got in the corner of the chotzer or the house. So Rabbi Yehuda says that you can continue to carry until the end of Shabbos. So Rabbi Yitzchak is going to say that even Rabbi Yehuda would agree with him that in the case of the 3 people and the one of them passes away, you would no longer be able to carry on Shabbos. Right? So Rabbi Yitzchak is going to argue that Rabbi Yehuda says that you can continue to carry in that house that the wall broke, because nothing changed in terms of the number of people that are inhabiting the space. But over here, where the number of people inhabiting the space change, and that kind of changes the rules of the game, so even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that they would no longer be able to continue to carry. So Beseder, so we have machlokes between Rabbi Yitzchak and Rav Huna about what happens when the number of people in this lovewood walled area fluctuates. Rav Huna says that it's all based on what it was when Shabbos started. Rabbi Yitzchak says that the halachas can change based on the number of people that come and go. And we tried to connect it to the machlokes between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, but both Rav Huna and Rabbi Yitzchak made the claims that actually both Tanaim hold like them, or would agree with their positions. Okay? New Mishnah. Arba'a dvarim pachu b'machne. There were 4 sort of exceptions that they made to an army encampment. So if you have an army encampment and they're going out to fight, and so there are 4 leniencies that we have for them. Mivim eitzim mikomakom, they can collect wood from wherever they want. Ufturin me'echitzas yadayim, and they don't have to wash their hands. Umidamai, they can eat demai. Umila'ariv, and they don't have to make eruvs. And we're going to explain what all these things mean. Tana Rabbanan, says the Gemara, Machna yotzes lemochemes reshus. If you have a camp that is going out to fight what's it called? What's Mochemes Reshus? Like a war that is not a mitzvah, an optional war, I guess. Discretionary war, I guess. Mutar begezel eitzim iveshim. So there's no issue of like stealing dry wood, I guess, for fire and stuff. That's waived. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema avchonin b'chomakom. They can encamp wherever they want. Uvmakom shene'erag and sham nikbarin, and wherever they die, they can be buried there. Says the Gemara, mutarin bigezel eitzim iveshim. So in terms of being able to steal, or at least it's not an issue of stealing when it comes to dry wood, they can take whatever dry wood they find. Haita kanta di Yoshua hava. So the Gemara says, what's the big chiddush? Yoshua already said, what the Amar Mar Asar Tanaim Isna Yoshua, that Yoshua made 10 Tanaim. 2 of them were Yumarin Bechorshin Umlaktan Eitzim Misdoseh. One of them being that you are allowed to allow your animals to graze in somebody else's kind of like foresty hefker area. Umlaktan Eitzim Misdoseh, and you can also collect wood from other people's fields, I guess from like kind of like hefkari kind of stuff. So what's the big chiddush by this encampment of soldiers? Even just regular old people can collect wood. So the difference is that what Yehoshua was talking about was with like shrubs and that kind of stuff. You can collect that kind of wood. Here, this is talking about good geschmack of firewood. You can chap rein. Inami, or else, what Yehoshua was talking about was wood that was connected to the ground. That was still like trees that you had to chop yourself. So you can go and find some forest and chop down some firewood. And over here we're talking about wood that was already chopped. They can just go and chap rein. Inami, or you could say that what Yehoshua was talking about was moist wood you can take. But over here, the chiddush is that even dry wood, they could chap rein. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema, avchonen b'chol makom, that they can also encamp wherever they like, uvmakom sheneragan sham nikbarim, and wherever they are killed, that is where they are buried. Pshita, this is obvious. Obviously, wherever they fall, they can be buried there, because meis mitzvah, because he would be considered a meis mitzvah. Meis mitzvah is somebody who dies and doesn't have anybody to bury him. So here, he died, and, he doesn't have relatives around or whatever, and we need to bury him, so you can bury him wherever he is, and that's that. Meis mitzvah kona makomo. And we know that a meis mitzvah, he acquires the place that he dies. So tzricha afagav deis lekovrin. So he said, yeah, but this is different. This isn't a meis mitzvah. This is a person who has relatives. And meaning he's out fighting, but he has relatives. And if he dies, he's not a meis mitzvah. And therefore it's a chiddush that even in this case, you can bury him wherever. The Tanya is, we learn in the Brayse, ezu meis mitzvah. What is considered a meis mitzvah? Kol she'ein lo kovrin, somebody who doesn't have any relatives to bury him. Kori v'acher monon also ein ze meis mitzvah. If he has relatives that he can just, call up and, they'll take care of him after he dies, so that would no longer be considered a meis mitzvah. Meis mitzvah kana makom, is it really true that a meis mitzvah acquires the place where he falls, where he dies? Ve'atanya, but we learn in a braysa, amotze meis muto b'stratya, if somebody finds a corpse on a main road, so you can move the corpse to the right shoulder or the left shoulder of the main road. If on the right side, if on one side there is a barren field and on the other side there is a plowed field, so move the corpse to the barren field. If there is a plowed field and a planted field, move the corpse to the plowed field. If they were both plowed or both seeded or both barren, so well then just choose whichever side you want. So the kasha is, if it's true that a meis mitzvah is just kona whatever place he wherever he is, well then why are we saying that you have to move the meis mitzvah? Just bury the meis mitzvah where you found him on the main road. So Bevai said, because we're talking about a mace who's lying across the road, that since already you're supposed to move him off of the main road so that Kohanim or other people who need to remain tahor will not run the risk of making an oil over the mace or wherever the mace is buried. So therefore we move him away. So since we move him away, so then, you can move him to whichever direction you want. We say that the soldiers do not need to wash their hands. Abai says this is only a reference to washing before they eat. They don't need to wash before they eat. However, washing their hands after they eat, they must wash their hands after they eat, even though they are soldiers. Rav Chia Bar Ashi said, how come they say that it's obligatory to wash mayim acharonim? Because there's this sodomite salt that makes you blind, and therefore wash your hands so you don't go blind. And the amount of melech stomas that you will usually find within salt is about 1 grain per 4,230 eggs or something. So it's not very much. It's one grain in a core. A core is 30 sa'ah. And how many sa'ahs was it in a core? I don't remember, like a bunch. Right, we did the cheshbon of 4,200 or something. We did the cheshbon recently, the Maisa. Wait, what's like 4,200 divided by 3 or something? I don't remember. Or maybe it was like 1,400, 2,800, 4,200, right? Okay, and what's 1,400? That would be like, because I think maybe it's Lamaisa 144. Maybe it's 144, or maybe that's what it was. 144 eggs and like, who can remember? Let's move on. Anyways, it's not very much Melech Stomas. What if he's just measuring salt? Certainly, if he's measuring salt, he's going to have to wash his hands. Okay, very good. And also these soldiers can eat demai. What's demai, chevra? Everybody knows what demai is because we learned the 7th parak of Masechta Brachos. Demai is produce that you purchase from an Amma Aretz, and you do not know for sure if he separated Meiser. He separated the 10% tithe. So in that case, it's demai, and you have to separate it yourself. But these soldiers can just eat it. That you can feed demai to aniyim, and you can feed demai to these soldiers that come to town. And as Rashi points out, these were Jewish soldiers. So you see that these Jewish soldiers can eat demai. Rav Huna says that we learn in a Braisa, so it says Rav Huna, Lemaisis Machlokas between Beishami and Beis Hillel. Beishami says that we do not feed demai to poor people and soldiers, and Beis Hillel says that we do. Okay. When the Ariv, and they do not need to make an Eruv. Eruve Chatzeres, Eruve Tchumen Chayavin. This means that they don't need to make an Eruve Chatzeres, that if you have 2 reshus hayachids that are joined to each other, or let's say they have different tents, that open up into like a chatzer. So they don't need to make an Eruve Chatzeres. Aval, Eruve Tchumen Chayavin. However, they would need to make an Eruve Tchumen. If they want to walk more than 2,000 amas outside of their encampment, they would need to make an Eruve Tchumen. Titani Reb Chia lo kan al Eruve Tchumen tvar Torah, because Reb Chia says that you get makis if you violate Eruve Tchumen mida oraisa, right? So you get malkos. So if it's an Isser de oraisa, so then you cannot violate it even if you are a soldier. Maskefla Reb Yonasan asked the kasha, v'chilokan alav shebe'al. Do you get malchus for a lav that is written in the Torah as al? As Rashi points out, the pasuk says al yetze ish mimkomo, that a person should not go out from his place, and it uses the lashon of al. It doesn't say lo, it says al. So Rabbi Yonasan says, can you really get malchus for a lav that is expressed in the Torah using the terminology of al? So Maskef Rav Acha bar Yaakov, says, yeah, of course you can. Elame'ata dichsev al tivnu ela ovos v'ela yidonim. When it says by these sorcerers, do not go to Ovos and Yidonim, Hachanami Dilo Laki, what are you going to argue that because it says Al, they're not going to get Malchus? Of course you're going to get Malchus Darin. So, therefore, what exactly is Rabbi Yonasan's Shaila? So Rabbi Yonasan Achi Kasha, this is what he's asking. Lav Shanitan Lasaris Misas Bezdin. Cholav Shanitan Lasaris Misas Bezdin in Lokan Olav. So we saw this on Daf Kuf Nudal of Masechta Shabbos, the concept of a lav that has associated with it Misas Bezdin, and if you have a lav that's associated with it Misas Bezdin, so then you will not get Malchus on it, right? So therefore, we're saying that when it comes to Tchumen, right, if this is, how could Reb Chia say that for violating Eruve Tchumen, you would get, for violating Tchum Shabbos, you would get Malchus, if when it comes to Chilul Shabbos is something that you chayiv Misa for. And since if you chayiv Misa for it in certain situations, well then, how would you ever get Malchus for it? Because something, a lav, Shinitan Lasaris Misas Bezdin, you never get Malchus for it. So the Gemara answers, Amar of Ashi, Miksiv al Yotzi al Yetze Ksiv. It doesn't say that, this pasuk talking about Tchumen, it doesn't say al Yotzi, right? It doesn't say that he shouldn't take out, which would be a reference to the Av Malach of Hotzah, which does have Misas Bezdin associated with it. Rather, it says al Yetze, he should not go out, right? Referring to Tchumen, which is not actually an Isser D'Oraisa, that you'd be, which is not, you wouldn't be Chayiv Malchus for it. You wouldn't be Chayiv Misa for it, and therefore you wouldn't be Chayiv Malchus for Hotzah either. However, when it comes to Tchumen, that's a different story, and you're actually not Chayiv Misa for Tchumen, right? Also, I think we saw, like according to Rabbi Akiva, that Tchumen is Mida Oraisa, but it's not one of the 39 Malachas. So you wouldn't be chayav misa for it, but you would be chayav malkos for these eruvei tchumen, and therefore that is why Reb Chia says that you be chayav malkos, and that is also why even the soldiers can't violate that. Hajj and alach mavui, we'll come back to mavui, but probably not for quite some time, only once our brains have recovered. Okay, so friends, this was Daf Yud Zayin of Masechta Ayruvin. And yeah, I think that the main really machlokas to find here, the main sugya over here was really on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, about when the number of people changes throughout Shabbos, what effect does that have on your reshus harabim that you construct, your reshus hayachid that you constructed. So Rafuna says that we kind of take a snapshot of the situation when Shabbos begins, and if you have 3 people in this area larger than a Beis Sasayim when Shabbos begins, even if one of them passes away, they can continue to carry. And if you had 2 people when Shabbos begins, well then even if somebody joins up with them, you cannot carry. Whereas Rabbi Yitzchak says it fluctuates. And, if somebody passed away on Shabbos, well then they can no longer carry. If somebody joined them on Shabbos, if there were 2 people initially, well then they can now carry. So that's the Machlokas Darton. And then the rest of the page, we got to that new Mishnah, the final Mishnah in Perek Yud Zayin. Of course, we finished Perek Yud Zayin. And that last Mishnah just kind of talks about different leniencies for soldiers that are going out to battle. Chevra, have a great day. Peace out.